Well, that was confusing.
You've never faced anything like this. Let them come.
I just got done seeing the new Transformers Rise of the Beasts movie. And what did I just see? Now, for those of you who might not know, I am a big fan of the Transformers. I've been in love with the franchise ever since I was a kid. Optimus Prime is probably one of my favourite characters of all time, and that's without a doubt. Like, this man's speeches can make me do literally anything, and I just wouldn't question it without a doubt. So you can imagine my excitement when I heard the announcement of Rise of the Beasts. Not only a Transformers movie, but a Transformers movie with a new G1 aesthetic. So I was pretty excited for this movie, if not a bit skeptical, because this wasn't just going to be an ordinary Transformers movie. They were bringing in everything with this. They were bringing in the Maximals from Beast Wars. They were bringing in Unicron, on top of adding new stuff for a movie that goes around 2 hours long. That's a lot of things you have to do in not so much time. And I'm going to be honest, you could feel that. Now, I'm not going to say this movie's bad, far from it. I really enjoyed it, I had a lot of fun with it. And I think you'll have a lot of fun with it too, especially if you're a Transformers fan, or even if you're a fan of the little plot twist at the end. You'll understand what I mean if you've seen the movie. So let's start off with some of the positives I had with this movie. Number one, the designs are just great, and the voice acting is just great. Prime looks and sounds like Prime. Optimus Primal, it looks fantastic. All the Maximals really look fantastic. With occasional dodgy CGI, but it goes past so fast you don't really notice it. The villain, though, was pretty intimidating. Scourge. Although we don't really see him much throughout the movie, when he is on screen, he is rather intimidating. They do a lot of like clever things, and the intro alone kind of makes me wish that we could see a Transformers horror movie, because we've seen that Transformers and horror can go really well together in the past, so why not give it a shot? Also, another thing I enjoyed was the human characters. These are probably some of the best human characters ever since the Bumblebee movie. Each ones have genuine story and genuine character. There's a real connection to them, and especially with the main character, we really feel a sense of honesty and humbleness with him, and it really draws us into the world more and helps ground the more fantastical Cybertronian stuff. But let's get on to some of the problems I had. A few of the little minor ones I'm going to talk about is Mirage. He's essentially the main Autobot of the movie. He's buddy with the main character, and although I really enjoyed Mirage, I found him to be quite funny. I can see why he might be a bit hit or miss with some people. Like, it's either going to be you really find him funny, or you're going to find him cringy. There's no in between with Mirage. It's very weird, but it's very hard to explain, but if you've seen the movie, you'll probably understand what I mean. Also, a few of the characters are a little off, because although, like, let's say Prime for example, although he looks and sounds like Prime, I can't help but see a little bit of the Bayverse Prime in him as well, because although he's meant to be a good leader, he's surprisingly racist towards humans, which is understandable in a way, but it's not like Optimus is just like, we shouldn't get involved to protect them anymore. No, he just straight up hates them, because for no discernible reason, he just always thinks that humans get in the way of everything. And without any setup to understand why he thinks this, after in the previous movie he was fine, it's a little off-putting. Not to mention, Optimus is murderous in this. He still has the Bayverse murder lust in him. Like when Scourge, and spoilers alert by the way, when Scourge kills Bumblebee in the first half, Prime legit takes all the stops off and wants to kill Scourge no matter what. He threatens he's going to take his head off, and in the end, he actually does kill Scourge in a brutal fashion, just like the Bayverse Prime. So it was kind of weird in a way. They both did Prime what justice and make Prime off as well. It's hard in between. But here's the main problem with the movie. The major problem with Transformers Rise of the Beasts it's almost too faithful to its source material. Now you might be wondering, how could being faithful be a problem? Well, in this case, Transformers is obviously more of a show, a franchise, things that go through TV. And adapting all that lore and story that they've brought in to a 2-hour movie just doesn't feel like enough time. Like when we get in this movie feels like it was meant to be a sequel to previous ones that have already set up these characters. Because we don't really get introductions or anything like that. We just cut straight into these characters and that's it. We don't understand why, we don't know what's going on, it's just suddenly we're here. And it feels like it's meant to have a deeper meaning, and it's meant to feel more emotional, but it just doesn't hit the same because we've never seen these characters before. In terms of this universe, we've never seen these characters live, we don't know what their motivations are, we've never seen them go around, and yet they act like this is just normal. Especially with the Maximal characters. They legit just show up out of nowhere. At the fight scene in the first half, where Bumblebee dies, Airazor just shows up out of nowhere. There's not even an indication of how she picked them up. They don't even explain it. She's just there. She just randomly shows up and they just decide, okay, this is what we're doing now.
How did I get here?
And the other Maximals, the characters are essentially in Peru trying to get another part of a key. And the Maximals just show up out of nowhere. Like, of all the places, they just happen to be in Peru. All of the other Maximals, other than Airazor. And it's weird because they show up at the weirdest time. They show up when the characters are looking for it. Which doesn't make sense, because in the context of the world, the key was already taken from it. So there'd be no reason for the Maximals to show up. And there wasn't really any disturbances going on for them to be alerted. So it was just rather jarring. And that's what this feels like. This feels more like it's meant to be the finale of a show rather than an actual movie. It feels like there was meant to be other episodes that built up to this, because this feels like when you watch a new show, but only its ending, so you have no idea what's going on because you didn't watch the whole thing. That's what it feels like. It feels like stuff is missing. Why the characters work, what are their motivations, what do they want. Like, sure, they say what they want, but they never go into depth beyond the surface. And things are just forgotten about as soon as they appear. Like, Prime's racism towards humans is brought up once again with Primal, where Optimus says, "You trust these people," and Primal says, "Yes, I do. We've trusted them for ages." And without any other additional scene or contemplating from Prime, he just looks at him and it just cuts away and suddenly he's on the human side. It's just like, this movie is fun. The action is fun. It's definitely better than some of the previous Transformers movies. In terms of rankings, I might have to go Bumblebee, the first Transformers, this movie, and Transformers Dark of the Moon, and the rest just under it. That would be my ranking. And the reason why I didn't put Rise of the Beast above, say, the other ones, even though I kind of enjoyed it more, was because it just didn't feel complete. It didn't feel like a full story. It felt like part of a story, but it didn't feel like the whole thing. It felt like if you were to just watch Avengers Infinity War for the first time, like, you wouldn't understand anything because it's your first viewing. You feel like everything is meant to have a deeper meaning, but you just don't feel it. This is an ending to a show that doesn't exist, and it's quite unfortunate because they had so much good stuff in this movie with the Maximals, the redesigns of the Autobots, and Unicron, who actually looks like Unicron. That had so much possibilities, but instead, it's just kind of something in the background, a looming threat for a future movie. The fight scenes were pretty cool, they were nice and dynamic, full of classic Transformers explosions, but everything just felt too hollow. It felt style over substance. Rivalries don't make sense, or are not explained upon, characters randomly showing up like it's nothing. Also, how do the Terracons show up in Peru? Like, one minute they're in New York, but only one of them is shown to be able to fly. The other two are cars. How did they get there? In fact, They actually managed to beat the Autobots there, because they're already watching them as they show up. So how did they get there? Like, little things like that makes no sense, and it really hurts the experience for me, because as an experience, it's enjoyable. This movie is fun, but as a movie, it's very flawed. And at this stage of the game, with this being, what, the 7th movie that's live action, we should definitely know better by this point. But those were just my initial thoughts on this movie. What did you guys think of this movie? Leave them in the comments. And for me, I'm gonna rate this movie a solid 6 out of 10. It's not bad, it's just not great. It's been the Pink King, and I'll talk to you all later.